Guess what? They're starting to apologize for being so wrong about COVID.
Oh.
They're trying to get it. They're trying to get out in front of it now. By the way, you see, so remember this was from The Atlantic. We covered this. Let's declare a pandemic amnesty. Let's focus on the future. Oh, yeah? Because the past doesn't look good for you, right? Yeah, let's look towards the future.
Further mandates?
And by the way, this picture that they're desecrating was made by Paolo Veronese during the Renaissance, a golden age of science, which ushered in witch hunts, torture, genocide, and war. Just,
and that's
who wrote that? Tristan Jordan Pfizer? Come on, am I right?
Tristan Jordan.
So now there's the new one. It's time. This is in Newsweek. It's time for scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID and it costs lives. And this guy wrote it. Guy named Kevin Bass. He's an MD and a Ph.D. student at medical school in Texas. He's in his 7th year. Taking him a while to get through that college.
Or is it, or is it? Hotez would call him a terrorist.
A terrorist. That's right. So, as a medical student and researcher, I staunchly supported the efforts of the public health authorities when it came to COVID-19. I believe that the authorities responded to the largest public health crisis of our lives with compassion, diligence, and scientific expertise. What? I don't get this joke.
He believed past tense.
He believed.
Yeah.
I believed. Oh, he used to believe that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, okay. I was with them when they called for lockdowns, vaccines, and boosters. I was wrong. We in the scientific community were wrong, and it costs lives. Wow. I can, when they start writing like Hemingway, right? You know it's serious.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Michael Caine. I got it wrong. Oopsie daisy. Okay, so I can see now that the scientific community, from the CDC to the WHO to the FDA and their representatives, repeatedly overstated the evidence and misled the public about its own views and policies. So they're lying the whole time, just like we thought. But you weren't allowed to ask that question. You'd get called an anti-vaxxer and a white supremacist and the tail on the kite of the white wing, which is what they called me.
A what?
They called me the tail on the kite of the right wing.
What?
Yeah, I know. So, including they lied about natural versus artificial immunity, school closures and disease transmission, aerosol spread, mask mandates, vaccine effectiveness and safety, especially among the young.
Oh my God, has this med student been doing his own research?
All of these were scientific mistakes at the time, not in hindsight. They were scientific mistakes at the time, meaning they knew they were wrong at the time. Of course they did. As we found out from the European Union's Parliament, asked the question of a Pfizer executive, hey, when did you test for these for transmission? And she said, we never even tested. So they knew they were lying. So these aren't whoopsie daisies. But amazingly, some of these obfuscations, meaning lies, continued to this present day. Obfuscations, Kurt. But perhaps more important than any individual error was how inherently flawed the overall approach of the scientific community was and continues to be. As Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford came on this show and told us, I think he's from Stanford, he said that we've had pandemics in the past and we never did lockdowns before. We never had mandatory.
Not even the Spanish flu.
Right. We didn't have lockdowns. We know how to handle these. It was flawed in a way that undermined its efficacy and resulted in thousands, if not millions, of preventable deaths. Holy cow. What we did not properly appreciate is that preferences determine how scientific expertise is used, and that our preferences might be, indeed our preferences were, very different from many of the people that we serve. Meaning they wanted to do shit to people, and people didn't want it done to them, and they didn't give a shit. That's what he means. We created policy based on our preferences, then justified it using data. And then we portrayed those opposing our efforts as misguided, ignorant, selfish, and evil. Boy, he did all that as a med student. Think about that. So anybody who pushed back, like this show, we were portrayed as misguided, ignorant, selfish, and evil. Not just by randos, but by some of people who I've known all my life did that.
Oh,
they did
you got injured, now you're against the kite out tail on the tail?
Mm-hmm. People I've known all my life said that I was selfish, evil, doing it for clicks and money.
You were the wind beneath the wings of the right.
Right wing. And Joe Rogan got it worse than me. He's forgiven all those people. I can't. They need to first apologize. We made science a team sport. Yes, remember we showed Josh Olson talked about how even if you think they're on your team, ignore them if they're not wearing a mask and saying COVID's over. Remember that?
What team is that?
So that's what I don't know what team that is. We made science a team sport, and in so doing, we made it no longer science.
Oh, that's true.
It became us versus them, and they responded the only way anyone might expect them to, by resisting.
It's weird we learn this lesson over and over and over again in a million places, but I guess don't learn it because it just keeps going.
It just keeps going. We excluded important parts of the population from policy development and castigated critics, which meant that we deployed a monolithic response across an exceptionally diverse nation, forged a society more fractured than ever, and exacerbated longstanding health and economic disparities.
You mean neoliberal capitalism?
Yeah. Our emotional response and ingrained partisanship prevented us from seeing the full impact of our actions on the people we are supposed to serve. We systematically minimize the downsides of the interventions we impose, meaning lockdowns, vaccines, masks, all that stuff, imposed without input, consent, and recognition of those forced to live with them.
Or as Klaus Schwab calls it, a good start.
That's in so doing, we violated the autonomy of those who would be most negatively impacted by our policies: the poor, the working class, small business owners, blacks and Latinos, and children. These populations were overlooked because they were made invisible to us by their systematic exclusion from the dominant corporatized media machine that presumed omniscience. Is that
Omniscience?
Omniscience, is that how you say it? It looks
Yeah,
like
omniscience.
omniscience, doesn't
Well, I mean,
it?
they kind of are tracking everyone.
Yeah. So from now on, public health policy is going to be dictated by Cory Bush and AOC. That's what I think. Most of us did not speak up in support of the alternative views. No kidding. Still people aren't. Jon Stewart pretends he's going to open up COVID to questions because questions are healthy, and then he brings on 3 hacks from the establishment that's just do propaganda and don't actually question anything.
Boy, wait till Kev graduates out in the real world and see what it's like.
Yeah.
It's even worse.
Most of us did not speak up in support of alternative views because the people in the medical professions are go along fucking pieces of it. That's why. Because they're spineless go-alongs. There was a handful of people in the medical profession that stood up and spoke out. And some of them got their licenses trying to take them away.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. Well, what are you going
to... No funding. You're going to get,
Hey, I almost lost my channel for telling the truth.
Well,
you got to tell the truth.
Is that the hill you want to die on?
When strong scientific voices like world-renowned Stanford professors John how do you say his name? Leonidas, Jay Bhattacharya, and Scott Atlas, or University of California, San Francisco professors Vinay Prasad and Monica Gandhi sounded the alarm on behalf of vulnerable communities, they face severe censure by relentless mobs of critics and detractors in the scientific community, often not on the basis of fact, but solely on the basis of differences in scientific opinion. Most of you didn't speak up in support of alternative views. I get it. You got student loans to pay off, huh? When former President Trump pointed out the downsides of intervention, he was dismissed publicly as a buffoon. And when Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Tony Science, opposed Trump and became the hero of the public health community, we gave him our support to do and say what he wanted even when he was wrong, which was every time he opened his mouth.
Wait, but Fauci, when Fauci opposed Trump, it was because he was anti-vax, wasn't it? Trump's way pro-vax.
Trump was super pro-vax. And yes, so when Trump was president, just like we showed you, that Hotez guy and Fauci, they were all like, be careful. And as soon as Trump wasn't president, they were like, the vax is safe and effective, and if you don't get it, you're crazy. Trump was not remotely perfect, nor were the academic critics of consensus policy. But the scorn that we laid on them was a disaster for public trust in the pandemic response. Our approach alienated large segments of the population from what should have been a national collaborative project. And you know what the effect of all the way they did this is? Now 35% of the country considers themselves vaccine hesitant. In general, not just for this one, but all vaccines. And people stopped taking their kids to get them vaccinated. Well done.
I never had an ounce of that before how they did this. Hesitation.
Me neither. Never had an ounce of hesitation about vaccines.
I had jokes about how stupid people were. That it was back in the.
I used to think RFK Jr. was probably was going out on a plank, right, or whatever, going out on a limb, and I thought he was a little. And then of course.
Yeah, right.
Of course, he's been onto something this whole time. That they hide data, they lie.
He's one of the better Kennedys also.
That's right. He's one of the better Kennedys. And we paid the price. The rage of those marginalized by the expert class exploded onto the dominated social media. Lacking the scientific lexicon to express their disagreement, many dissidents turned to conspiracy theories and a cottage industry of scientific contortionists to make their case against the expert class consensus that dominated the pandemic mainstream. Labeling the conspiracy theory was what the fuck you guys were saying. That was what you're admitting. So you're still calling somebody else conspiracy theorists, as you're admitting you guys were lying at every turn.
Is our for-profit healthcare system a conspiracy? I thought it was.
It's not a conspiracy.
I guess it's not a theory. It's right. How it works. Everybody knows.
Labeling this speech misinformation and blaming it on scientific illiteracy and ignorance, the government conspired. Just what I said. They did the conspiracy. The government conspired with big tech to suppress it, erasing the valid political concerns of the government's opponents.
You know what's shocking is the newer Twitter files where the guy that got run out of there is like, hey, they're out of line now with this. Like, it was too much even for him, what the government was doing.
And this despite the fact that pandemic policy was created by a razor-thin sliver of American society who anointed themselves to preside over the working class, members of academia, government, medicine, journalism, tech, and public health, who are highly educated and privileged. So I say from now on, public health policy should be dictated by Pink. Okay. From the comfort of their privilege, this elite prizes paternalism, as opposed to average Americans who laud self-reliance and whose daily lives routinely demand that they reckon with risk.
Can you believe and these are all the people that whined about patriarchy for last 10 years, and that's what they love. Yes. Just do as you're told. We're the patriarchs of this.
Yep. That many of our leaders neglected to consider the lived experiences of those across the class divide is unconscionable.
Why not just say experience? Is there like a dead experience you have?
The lived experience?
You mean experience?
It's redundant, right? Lived experience. What other kind of experience is there? I experienced that, but I wasn't living.
I don't know.
Lived experience, it's another woke word.
That came out, that phrase, for something else. I don't know. I guess it's just mutated into just throwing it around now.
My lived experience.
It was always stupid, but it wasn't for this. It was just, you mean experience.
Incomprehensible to us due to this class divide, we severely judged lockdown critics as lazy, backwards, and even evil. We dismissed as grifters those who represented their interests. We believed misinformation energized the ignorant, and we refused to accept that such people simply had a different valid point of view. They still do. Most of them still do. You go on, they're still doing it.
Yeah, right.
By the way, none of my friends have apologized to me at all.
Then they weren't your friends.
Well, they're not admitting. We crafted policy for the people without consulting them. If our public health officials had led with less hubris, the course of the pandemic in the United States might have had a very different outcome with far fewer lost lives.
But these people are stupid and didn't vote for Hillary. How can we do that?
That's right.
They're so stupid and I hate them.
Instead, we have witnessed a massive and ongoing loss of life in America due to distrust of vaccines and the healthcare system, a massive concentration in wealth by already wealthy elites, a rise in suicides and gun violence, especially among the poor, a near doubling of the rate of depression and anxiety disorders, especially among the young, a catastrophic loss of educational attainment among already disadvantaged children, and among the most vulnerable, a massive loss of trust in healthcare, science, scientific authorities, and political leaders more broadly. That's what they did. And the people are still out there pushing. The COVIDians are still doing it. Guys like Dave Anthony, who hosts the Dollop podcast. Guys like Josh Olson. There's still Walker Bragman, of course. All those fucking people.
All guys I never heard of.
They're all doing it still.
Yeah, because nobody cares about it. Like Brian Stelter. I'll say it. Or the guy who says, I'll do anything and say anything.
They're just repeaters of propaganda at the top of their lungs while they're being indignant. They're telling you not to read as they wag their finger at you for being stupid. They literally tell you, stop reading.
You could tell who's a scumbag liar real easily. If they're answering a question with a fact, that's different than someone going, oh, were you with the bad people?
Yes.
If your argument's that, then I know you're bullshit out of the gate.
It's okay. By the way, Dave Anthony, who blocked me on Twitter and then tweets, talk shit about me from behind a block, which I knew he had a lot of emotional problems, Dave Anthony, and a lot of people don't like.
Why? Because he had two first names?
But I didn't think he was that big of a coward.
I thought you were telling me about a two-man podcast called Dave and
Anthony. No, it's just one guy.
Just one guy?
It's okay to be wrong and admit where one was wrong and what one learned. That's his friend, Dave Anthony's friend, Josh Olson, deleted 2 years of tweets. That's what a fucking pussy he is.
We need a COVID amnesty.
I wonder if, so Dave Anthony just blocks me so I can't see the stupid shit he's saying. Hey, it's okay to be wrong and admit where one was wrong and what one learned. That's a central part of the way science works.
What?
Yet I fear that many are too... Science is tested. Science is questioned. That's how it works. If it can't be questioned, it's propaganda. It's not science. Yet I fear that many are too entrenched in groupthink and too afraid to publicly take responsibility to do this.
Well, I got some bad news. Your fears are going to be well borne out.
Yes. Solving these problems in the long term requires a greater commitment to pluralism and tolerance in our institutions, including the inclusion of critical, if unpopular, voices. Intellectual elitism, credentialism, and classism must end. Restoring trust in public health and our democracy depends on it.
You know what? A credentialist is what a bunch of these people, besides being classist, that's the number one.
So do you know what the original headline of this article was? So you think you're smarter than Kid Rock? That was the original. Turns out Kid Rock got it right.
I remember going to Florida on tour during the pandemic, and I'm wearing my mask, and all these people are like, what are you? I mean, basically calling me homo slurs.
Yeah.
And all of that, none of them they were all fine. I feel like a chump now.
I feel like the biggest chump in the world because I got injured.
You know what else? They're at the beach, these people, the vitamin D.
Remember how they tried to make... Yes, so they're all getting vitamin D, which is really helpful in fighting COVID. And they were shaming those people for being outside at spring break without a mask.
I mean, people I know were blaming him for killing her mom or something.
Yes. Yes.
Idiot.
So there you go. There you go. They're starting to apologize for not only being wrong, but for knowing they were wrong and still saying the shit that they were saying. They knew it was wrong at the time and still said it. They knew you couldn't vaccinate your way out of this pandemic. They knew no matter how many people got vaccinated, it wasn't going to kill this virus. They knew that it didn't stop transmission, and they knew all this stuff.
This is the kind of like willing lies that we would normally be using for a war.
And they tried to, yes.
Yeah.
And then they tell themselves we are fighting Nazis, meaning Trumpers. And so then it's okay to lie. It's okay to lie about ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. It's okay to lie about vitamin D. It's okay to lie about everything.
Yeah, right.
Masks. It's okay to lie about
vitamins.
It's okay to lie about the vaccine, which they lied about.
Yeah.
And by the way, the vaccine is safe and effective, and I have to tell you that it's super safe and effective. Kurt, you know,
slows the spread.
Is what it does. It slows it, the transmission and contraction, and it'll keep you from.
They never said it stops it.
They never said that.
Come on, you know that's not true. Ted, you know that's not true.
But it will keep you from getting seriously ill, hospitalized, or dead. That's the beauty. My heart swells with pride just thinking about when I got my vaccine. I get short of breath just thinking about the excitement I had.
Stories, I go and self-administer a new booster to myself.
I got out of breath with the excitement over how protected I am from the vaccine.
I'm lightheaded. My heart's beating fast.
Because I am protected. Hey, we're doing live stand-up comedy in Los Angeles, Tempe, Arizona, Palm Springs, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Nashville, Northampton, Massachusetts, and a lot more places. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets and become a premium member while you're there. You get access to all of our stuff. See you then.